Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Public Scoping Meeting number 2, and thank you for your interest in the project. I am Stacy Mueller from GHD and will be hosting today's event. Karen Miller and Simona Ramirez-Diaz, also from GHD, will assist in the production and moderation of today's event. As we are all likely adapting to new technology, I would like to cover some items to expect while viewing or listening to our event today. First, today's event is being recorded, and recordings from all 3 public scoping meeting sessions will be made available for future viewing through links on the project webpage. Secondly, you have joined us in listen-only mode through the WebEx Event Center platform. There will be a period during today's event when those of you who have joined us by internet will be able to ask questions through a Q&A feature on your screen. We will share instructions on how to submit those questions just before the question and answer session begins. Please note that questions you submit today may be published for all attendees to view during today's event and will eventually be available on the project's webpage. If you are familiar with WebEx or other similar video conferencing products, we'd like to remind you that the WebEx Event Center platform is very different from a meeting platform. You will not be able to share your audio or video feeds, and we will not be using other features such as chat, polling, or raise hand. Again, we will only be using the Q&A feature. And if you're not familiar with WebEx and the Q&A feature, we will be providing verbal and on-screen instructions on how you may participate prior to beginning the moderated question and answer portion of today's event. So we have not opened that feature yet, but when we do, we will make sure that you have good instructions on how to access that. If you have dialed into the audio conference only, you will not be able to submit questions today through the Q&A feature, and you will remain in listen-only mode. If you visit the project's webpage, you are able to click a button on the left-hand side of the webpage to submit your questions. Responses to questions submitted through the project webpage may be addressed outside of today's event. The presenters today will be sharing several ways for you to submit official scoping comments outside of today's event. We are sharing these ways on your screen now, and will also share again throughout today's event. You can mail or you can send email to CEMVN-midbreton@USACE.Army.mil, or you can call to leave a recorded voice comment at 1-855-643-2738. At this time, I would like to introduce Renee Pochet of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Renee, you may begin.
Thank you, Stacy. And good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the scoping meeting concerning the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. The Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority of Louisiana has applied to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for permits and permission to construct, maintain, and operate the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. This is on the east bank of the Mississippi River near Wills Point in Plaquemines Parish. In compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act, the Corps will prepare an environmental impact statement to inform its permitting decisions. The Corps is seeking public comment to assist in determining the scope of the issues, resources, impacts, and alternatives to be addressed in the document. You are extremely important to the process, and we want to hear from you. Comments will be collected through August 16th, 2020. At any time during the scoping period, interested parties can provide their official comments using one of the following. There's the regular mail address there. You can go by email at CEMVN-Midbreton, that's MIDBRETON, at USACE.Army.mil, and you could submit oral comments via a toll-free number at 855-643-2738. That's 643-2738. Today there will be 3 recorded presentations. The first will be from Colonel Stephen Murphy, New Orleans District Commander, with opening remarks. Then Brad Laborde, Army Corps of Engineers Regulatory Project Manager, will provide an overview of the Corps' permit process. He'll be followed by Brad Barth, Louisiana Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, who will provide an overview of the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. After that, we will take questions. We'll answer as many questions as possible, and unanswered questions may be responded to on the project webpage. Again, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, I'm Colonel Stephen Murphy. I'm the commander of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers New Orleans District, and I wanted to thank you for participating today in this first in a series of virtual meetings regarding the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Environmental Impact Statement. Today, your participation is invaluable to us because your participation and the questions you provide us will help us come to the best decision possible. That us is the permit applicant, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, and the Corps of Engineers. And today we hope to provide you insight into the process and the authorities that govern this process, and really to address your questions and hear your feedback. We're doing this in a virtual environment because of everything we've been experiencing with COVID-19. So I want to ask you for your patience as we move forward. This is a new process, and I'm sure that we'll experience just a few slip-ups along the way. So thank you again for participating. We appreciate it very much, and I look forward to your feedback as you provide input to help the Corps come to the best decision possible.
Hello, and welcome to the virtual scoping meetings for the proposed Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. My name is Brad Laborde. I am the Corps Regulatory Project Manager for the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project Review and Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS. This presentation is available to you on the Corps Mid-Breton webpage. It will also be part of our live events. However you choose to participate, myself and the Corps Mid-Breton Review Team thank you for sacrificing some of your time to actively participate and provide input on the proposed project. Ideally, the Corps would host these meetings in person. However, due to challenges with the ongoing public health crisis, we cannot do that at this time. The goals of this presentation and the scoping meetings are to, 1, provide you with brief details on CPRA's or the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority of Louisiana's proposed Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. Following my presentation, Brad Barth of CPRA will provide more details on their proposed project and CPRA's overall mission. 2, explain the Corps review process, including our NEPA or National Environmental Policy Act review. 3, and most importantly, provide you with a platform to answer any questions you may have so you can adequately prepare your scoping comments. This presentation, along with additional visual aids and a project fact sheet, are available on the Corps of Engineers New Orleans District Mid-Breton webpage. If interested, please review this information and, if you can, participate in one of our live events scheduled for July 14th, 15th, and 16th. During these 3 live events, participants can call in to listen using the number and access codes shown here. Additionally, participants using the internet can go to the Corps Mid-Breton webpage and click on the appropriate link to direct you to the web meeting. From there, questions can be submitted using the chat box in the WebEx online platform. During live events, a moderator will relay questions for Corps or CPRA representatives to answer. All 3 meetings will be recorded and posted on the Corps Mid-Breton webpage. Your participation in our scheduled live events is for informational purposes. It does not count as your official scoping comment. Your scoping comments can be submitted by traditional mail, email, or by telephone as shown here. Here is a screenshot of the Corps Mid-Breton webpage. The main section has summary and schedule information. All scoping meeting info will be on the left. you can click the Submit Scoping Question box prior to our live events to send us a question to be answered during the live meetings. On the right side of the web page, you will see information about how to submit your official scoping comments. The two links at the bottom are for the core Mid-Breton web page and the permitting dashboard. These two links should be the top two results if you Google core Mid-Breton. The permitting dashboard allows interested parties to track our progress during the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project review. Be sure to periodically check this link after the scoping process to monitor our progress. CPRA has proposed to construct, operate, and maintain the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. The concept of diversions has been studied as a coastal restoration tool for some time now. Coastal Louisiana currently has two freshwater diversions in operation, Davis Pond on the west bank and Carnarvon on the east bank. CPRA is proposing Mid-Breton as a sediment diversion designed to convey water at volumes up to 75,000 cubic feet per second, or CFS, depending on Mississippi River level and flow rates. When the diversion structure is closed, a base flow of up to 5,000 CFS is proposed. If constructed, the project footprint would be on the east bank near Wills Point in Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana. At this point, you may be asking yourself, if this is a CPRA project, why is the Corps of Engineers involved? Well, the Corps is directed to by Congress via the Rivers and Harbors Act and the Clean Water Act. If a member of the general public has an action or project that may impact a Corps Civil Works project, one must obtain a Section 408 permission from the Corps. This includes any federally mandated levee or waterway. The applicant must demonstrate that the proposed activity will not be injurious to the public's interest and will not impair the usefulness of the federal project. If a member of the public has an action or project that obstructs or alters a navigable waterway, such as a dock, pier, or water conveyance, it would require a Section 10 permit, as the Corps regulatory program is tasked with maintaining navigation in U.S. waters. Similarly, if a member of the general public has an action or project that requires excavating and or filling into jurisdictional wetlands, a Section 404 permit would be required. It must be demonstrated that the project is in the public's interest and steps have been taken to avoid and minimize adverse impacts to our nation's wetlands, and, if required, provide compensatory mitigation for any outstanding wetland impacts to proceed. During all permit reviews and during the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Review, the Corps regulatory staff remains neutral and independent in our decision-making. Our mission is to make permit decisions off best available science, engineering standards, and professional judgment. Again, the Corps is neither for or against this or any other application we review. Okay, so here is CPRA's proposed project Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion footprint using Mardi Gras colors. In LSU purple, you have the full construction footprint. Within that, in LSU gold, you can see the outline of the actual structure and changes to LA 39. In two-lane green, CPRA anticipates modifications to the existing pump station along this back levee. If you think back to the previous slide, CPRA hit the permitting trifecta requiring a Section 10, 404 permit, and a Section 408 permission. To better understand, you can break the project into three segments. One, the area within and along the Mississippi River to the Mississippi River levee has Section 10, 404, and 408 interests. Two, between the Mississippi River and the back levee, where there are impacts to Section 404 wetlands. And three, the outfall area into Breton Sound, where Section 10 and 404 would apply, with perhaps some 408 interest too. Here, a conveyance structure extends through wetlands to Oak River. This slide offers two zoomed-out shots of the project area. On the left, you can see the project footprint and CPRA's anticipated transition area in white. This is where deltaic processes can be expected based on CPRA's preliminary estimates. Additional water quality and salinity impacts are anticipated outside this area. On the right, you can get a better view of the project location with reference to the New Orleans metropolitan area to the top left. Following the Mississippi River, you can see the project location. The Breton Sound Basin and the Mississippi River Basin in Plaquemines and St. Bernard parishes are where most impacts will be. How far impacts may go to the east and northeast into the Pontchartrain Basin and Chandelier Sound, if at all, is unknown at this time. The Corps is independently reviewing all of CPRA's models to better understand the extent of impacts, including land building and accretion, storm surge, and aquatic resources to determine the overall beneficial and adverse impacts associated with CPRA's projects. So now that we've discussed Section 408 permissions and the Section 10 and 404 permits, it's important to know what our decision-making tool is, and that is NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. The NEPA process and documents serve as our evaluation and decision-making tool. The Corps is the lead federal agency for this effort. A third-party contractor has been selected to help write and independently review CPRA's Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion project. The level of our NEPA review is dependent on the impacts. In this case, the Corps has already determined that this project could significantly affect the quality of the human environment, requiring an EIS or environmental impact statement. An EIS is a detailed study of a project's potential impacts to the human environment. As the Corps, as the lead federal agency, is in charge of drafting the EIS in coordination with the federal cooperating agencies. The scoping comments you provide will help us determine the appropriate amount of detail for each specific resources to be impacted. The end results or outputs from the EIS will be included into a record of decision, or ROD, which would announce the Corps permitting decision in conjunction with other federal laws. Typically, the most important details in an EIS can be found in chapters 1 through 4. Chapter 1 outlines a project's purpose and need statement. That explains why a particular project is being pursued. Chapter 2, the alternatives section, outlines the alternative projects that will be examined in the EIS analysis. Chapter 3, affected environment, is a description of the project area's existing conditions and trends. Chapter 4, environmental consequences, and perhaps the most important part of the EIS, analyzes the impacts of the proposed project and alternatives, including the no-action alternative. For the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion EIS, the Corps, in coordination with our federal cooperating agencies, established a purpose and need statement based off the one provided by CPRA in their permit application. From there, we evaluated potential alternatives. CPRA has provided an alternatives analysis for Corps review. The Corps, in coordination with the federal cooperating agencies, did an independent review of alternatives from prior studies, the CPRA submittal, and evaluated other potential coastal restoration tools. Our alternatives analysis is not complete. It is not complete until we also evaluate alternatives provided during this scoping process. Reasonable alternatives received during scoping will be given the same considerations established during our preliminary review. After preliminary review, the list of alternatives to be evaluated in the EIS are sediment diversions with maximum flows of 35,000 CFS, 75,000 CFS, the applicant's preferred alternative, and 115,000 CFS. 2 alternative base flows are also being evaluated, a 2,500 CFS and 5,000 CFS base flow scenario. To wrap up, the scoping process is the public's opportunity to tell the Corps what you want to see addressed in the EIS. You play a central role in the regulatory process. Particularly, if you've listened to my presentation this long, please submit your comments by email or traditional mail. You can also submit a verbal comment at 1-855-MID-BRET. The number allows 4 minutes for your comment. Verbal comments will be transcribed and included into the permit record. Verbal comments can be provided in multiple different languages and later translated. Also, if you're viewing this before our live events, please participate in one if you can. We will be addressing your questions during these times. Public involvement does not end with scoping. While preliminary work on the EIS has begun, we are early in the EIS process, which starts with public scoping. Once scoping is complete, CPRA will provide all project modeling material in a series of technical reports. The Corps, with the help of the third-party contractor and cooperating federal and state agencies, will independently review CPRA's material, along with other best available science to draft the EIS. The draft EIS is scheduled to be complete in fall 2022. Shortly after the draft EIS, the Corps will host a public hearing. The Corps will then revise the draft EIS based on public hearing feedback to produce the final EIS, currently scheduled in the fall of 2023. Then the final EIS will go for public review before the all-important permit and record of decision, currently scheduled for January 2024. The permit decision can be a denial, proffering a least damaging alternative examined in the EIS, or approval of CPRA's preferred alternative. Lastly, I want to leave you with a list of potential issues that we will address along with your concerns. This list is part of the visual aids we have available to you on the Corps Mid-Breton webpage. When providing your scoping comment, please consider the following questions. What important issues, resources, and impacts should be considered in the EIS? What alternatives or modifications to the existing proposal should be considered in the EIS? And if there are other problems or opportunities the Corps should be aware of. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your participation and be safe during these times. Now I'll hand it over to Brad Barth from CPRA. Thank you.
Welcome to the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Public Scoping Meeting. I'm Brad Barth with the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. I'm the Sediment Diversion Program Manager. I'm also in the Operations Group with CPRA. I'm the Operations Assistant Administrator. Thank you for coming today. Real quick, we'll go over an introduction. We'll talk a little bit about our coast, our land loss. We'll talk about addressing the root cause for reconnecting our river, which will lead us into talking about the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion. And then lastly, we'll hit upon and talk a little bit about our operations and adaptive management. So who is CPRA? Post-2005, Hurricane Katrina, the legislator looked at how the state was implementing coastal restoration and coastal protection, and combined us into one group or one agency to do an integrated approach to handling restoration and protection efforts, leading to the creation of Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. So you may be familiar with this map, may have seen it before. Since 1932, it's over 80 years of actual data that we've observed from USGS of land loss, over 2,000 square miles. When we look at going forward over the next 50 years, if you're familiar with the Coastal Master Plan, you're familiar with, we look at a couple different sea level rise scenarios. This would be the medium scenario. Potentially, we're on order of 4,200 square miles that we have the potential to lose over the next 50 years should we do nothing. So what's at stake here? When we look at coastal Louisiana, what's at stake is our flood protection, our natural processes of the lower coast of Louisiana, our coastal habitats, our cultural heritage, and our working coast are at stake. Our Coastal Master Plan is required by the legislator every 6 years. It's a $50 billion plan. It's equally split between restoration and protection or risk reduction, $25 billion to each. It is required for us to look at this every 6 years, and really what this is It's really how we rank and select projects for implementation every 6 years. It gives us the ability to put the best projects on the landscape, considering the information, science, and analysis available to rank projects. That's really what it is. We don't have $50 billion, but this gives us a pool of projects to select from to put the best projects on the ground with changing environmental conditions. Our root cause. Early 1900s, we were really in the process of completing the lower Mississippi River protection system. Great feat in terms of protecting our nation, our citizens, and our navigation interests in terms of economics of the entire United States. So what that's done is left a lot of areas that don't have that access to the fresh water, the sediment, and the nutrients. And that's really been starving those areas and leading those areas into a degrading nature or degrading wetland environment. When we look at some imagery across coastal Louisiana, we can look to our neighbors to the west in the Atchafalaya, Wax Lake Delta area. One of the only areas in coastal Louisiana that is experiencing land gain, no land loss in these areas. And these areas have that direct access to fresh water, sediment, and nutrients all combined together. If we go look at areas further to the east, our Breton Sound Basin, we don't have that same access to the fresh water, sediment, and nutrients. And that's why you look at this, you can see the blue for the Wax Lake Atchafalaya, call that the happy face. You look at the Breton Sound side, the frowny face. So let's talk a little bit more specifically why you're here today for the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. Some basic details. River mile locations at 68 on the Mississippi River on the east or the left descending bank, Wills Point, Bertrandville area. The funding is through NIFWIF, oil spill dollars. Tasks currently that are being worked on right now are the engineering, design, and permitting tasks associated with this permit application, and thus why you're at. Some of the details of this project, we'll be looking to have an inlet along the river in the -20 to -35 foot elevation range. The overall corridor width for permanent construction features is approximately 1,400 feet wide, approximately half a mile long. The capacity for the diversion is estimated up to 75,000 CFS. So it's a passive system, so it relies on the water level of the river and the water level of the basin to send the water, the nutrients, and the sediment out into the basin. So at low river flow in the beginning of the spring flood season, the diversion may only be able to flow on order of 30 or 40,000 CFS. As it approaches max flood stage and reaches a million plus on the flow of the river, will be up closer to the 75,000 CFS and how it operates. Base flow up to 5,000 CFS is what we're asking for in the permit. With that, we know base flow is a more of an environmental condition out in the future. We really only want to flow what makes some sense environmentally going forward into the future based on conditions at the time that we're operating. Major components and features of the project will consist of an inlet, a conveyance structure, and an outlet. It'll require us to do some interior drainage modifications to maintain drainage within the interior in the Bertrandville Wills Point area, and then also require us to relocate Highway 23. This slide kind of gives you a footprint of the project area. The main footprint includes temporary and permanent right-of-ways. At this point, that's in very infancy of the engineering and design process, but this gives you an idea of perspective of the footprint of the project in terms of both temporary and permanent features. The lower blue dot down to the right would be the pump station, where we're looking at some potential improvements to the pump station for that interior drainage. When we look at sediment diversions, what's the goal here? Really the goal is selecting a location along the river that's got a super concentrated amount of sediment, obviously from deposition onto a point bar. And when we can use that material and concentrate that material off that point bar, then we can maximize that sediment diverted out into the basin and minimize that fresh water. Looking at over project operations, this is a 3D rendition. Obviously the project is on the east bank or the left descending bank. You can see here the flow through the intake into the gated structure and then out into the Breton Sound Basin. Looking at plan view, you can see a little bit more detail here with permanent features and then potential temporary areas for construction laydown or staging areas. Again, major features are intake channel, the gate structure, LA 39 relocation, the channel conveyance, and then out to the outfall area with a pilot channel out to River Shin or Oak River. Again, another 3D rendition here. Looking at, you can see from kind of the bottom left to the top right, the Mississippi River levee, our inlet channel, the gate structure. So this is a controlled gated facility. So when we're not operating, the gates would obviously be closed. Channel conveyance out to the outfall area and then out into the basin. Kind of looking north-south here, looking at the gate complex and the inlet and conveyance channels with the guide levees. So let's talk a little bit about operations. So as part of this permit, an initial operations plan is included such that the Corps can evaluate this project. Our trigger for the on-off or the start and stop of the diversion is 450,000 CFS at Belle Chase. That also includes up to 5,000 CFS base flow when we're below that 450,000 CFS. That base flow is for future changing environmental conditions. And again, it's an up to number. We would expect the base flow to only operate and flow at a level needed based on the future operational conditions or environmental conditions we see in the basin. We expect that to be lower than the 5,000. Adaptive management plan. So this is a key part of dealing with environmental changes in the future, and really gets at the heart of our mission is to be able to consider our changing environment and be able to manage at or below those levels stated above based on the conditions we see. Additional emergency stops, tropical activity, spills, and navigation. As part of our charge as CPRA is flood protection. We don't want to have conflicting messages there in terms of flood protection. So no desire or intention to have this thing operating during a tropical storm or a hurricane, and thus we'll have a plan in place to close the gates during any kind of hurricane or tropical storm activity. Adaptive management. Again, really this is all the information, all our real-time monitoring and information that's gathered for anything from looking at the performance of our project to providing us data and information on our changing environment, which will allow us to make operational changes as needed based on our permit conditions. So some of the things that we may be looking at are the sediment load, the flow in the river, salinity in the basin, the stage in the river, and other water quality parameters and such. As we go forward in this permitting process, CPRA will continue to have some boats out in the river on a regular basis to do some river sediment sampling, to continue to gather the information necessary for us to have an efficient design in terms of understanding the hydrology, the hydraulics, and the sediment transport, so we can maximize that sediment capture. So site-specific data and information leading into our effort there. We'll continue into the 30% design effort. That 30% design effort will then directly support the permitting process and provide the necessary information to the public in terms of what the project looks like, the features of the project, the components of the project, such that the Corps can assess those things based on this public scoping meeting and your input. Physical model testing as part of that hydrology and hydraulic testing. One of the things we want to do is also have a physical scale model of the project as well, so that way we can look at both numerical and physical modeling and be able to have input there in terms of getting the best design. And that way it's also tested as well and not some type of experiment. We've already done that physical scale model testing. And then obviously we'll continue for our outreach and engagement, where we try to put as much information that we can and maintain that transparency of information we have and where we're at in the process of the project. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Okay, we thank everyone for remaining patient and giving your attention to those recorded messages. And just a reminder that copies of those recorded messages, as well as the slide deck of the presentations, are available on the Corps' project webpage. So at this time, we want to introduce our panel that will begin the question and answer session. So if I'll ask the panel to share their webcams at this time, and you can remain on mute until you need to speak. But we will introduce the panel. From the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we have Brad Laborde, Jeff Verisco, Landon Parr, Brenda Archer, and Renee Pochet. And from the State Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, we have Brad Barth, Brian Lizina, Liz DeVoli, Heather Larison, and Tim Smith. And you can likely see that they are all in multiple locations. We appreciate the efforts that the panel has made to be here today. So now for those of you who are attending, we have opened the Q&A feature, and we had promised to walk you through how to use that today so that you can pose questions to the panel. We would like you to begin submitting your questions now, and while we wait for questions to come in, Karen is our moderator. Karen, would you like to give us instructions on how we can use the Q&A feature today?
Yes, thanks, Stacy, and good afternoon, everyone. We hope to respond to all your questions today. It's important to the Corps and CPRA to help clarify CPRA's proposed project and the Corps' review of that project so that everyone can develop their official scoping comments. Any questions not addressed today may be answered on the project webpage. We have included instructions on the screen for how to participate using the WebEx Q&A feature. So if you'll take a moment to find the Q&A feature by hovering your mouse or tapping in the middle of the screen, you'll either see a question mark icon, or you may need to find the icon that has 3 dots on it. That's the More Options icon. When you hit on that, you should find an option to select Q&A. These icons may be located either on the right side or the center of your screen. And if you are on a mobile device, you may have to tap at either the top or the bottom of your screen. So once you pull up that Q&A, you should be able to type in your question. Then make sure you select all panelists, and finally select send to send your question. We will acknowledge receipt of all questions with a general response, and we'll publish the questions so that other attendees may view them during this live event. Please, we're going to ask that you use appropriate language. We will monitor messages as well as give warnings for those that do not comply with this request. Repeated use of inappropriate language can be cause for removal from today's event. As a reminder for those of you who have joined late, or if you have dialed in the audio conference only mode, you will not be able to submit questions today and will remain in listen only mode. We will encourage everyone to submit your official scoping comments through the channels that were mentioned during the previous presentations, and that we will share again near the end of today's event. So while we're waiting for questions to come in, and Stacy, I'm not seeing the question panel opened, but maybe that's
Okay, well, that's fine,
issue.
Karen. We'll give you a moment to find that today. And again, just a reminder that we want to respond to all questions today. Your feedback is very important to help the Corps and CPRA clarify the proposed project and the Corps' review of the project. Hopefully the responses to the questions that are given today help you formalize and finalize your official scoping comments, and we'll be sharing the ways to share those official scoping comments. Karen, are you ready? Or are you
Great, I am ready now.
Okay.
And while we're waiting for your comments to come in, there was a few questions that came in through our website. Barbara Johnson, President and CEO of the Great Delta Tours, submitted some questions, and we thank her for taking the time to do that. So her first question is, what are the key factors you will be assessing in determining the impact of the Breton Sound Diversion Project on fisheries in the area? So I'm going to throw that back to you, Renee and Brad.
Okay. So for addressing fisheries in the basin, we do have models that we're exploring to identify those impacts. Clearly, some of the key factors would hinge on water quality and salinity and suitability for the different species that are currently in the basin.
Okay, great. And she has a second question. What is the geographic area you will be evaluating with regard to fisheries impact? How will you determine the impact area for the fisheries assessment?
So preliminarily, we are looking at the Breton Basin, which would extend from, I guess, the Mississippi River and extend out to essentially the MRGO area. But we could potentially expand that if our analysis warrants it. How far to the east and to the northeast our assessment goes is going to be a little bit dependent on where we see water quality changes through the modeling and the analysis that we do.
Thank you for that answer. She actually has a third question. It's a rather long one, so let's be patient and I'll read the whole thing. What is the overall goal of the project with regards to fisheries impact? Is it to ensure that the quality, productivity, and sustainability of the fisheries remain in its current state? The fisheries ecosystem has been in decline for some time. My recommendation is that the overall goal of the project with regard to fisheries is that these coastal fisheries provide the highest quality, safest wild caught, and sustainable seafood source.
All right, thank you. We're going to ask the state to respond to that, please.
Hey, Brad, this is Brad with CPRA. We've had a little bit of interference there. If you could repeat that question.
It's essentially asking if fisheries impacts were considered with the operation of the diversion.
Yeah, hi, Brian Lazina with CPRA, and thanks for the question on there. Obviously, in any project in the master plan, and we have to take all of these things into consideration. As you heard Brad mention in his presentation about this particular project, there's a lot of things that go into project selection on there, including fisheries production. I think it's important to note that we focus sometimes on specific points on a map, but we absolutely do take these things into account. I will say that sometimes that means into the future as well. That might not be, just tomorrow, but obviously 30, 50 years from now, that's the state's charge to make sure these things are viable into the future. So So on whole, yes, we do take all of these things into account within the state's coastal master plan. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Now, Alex Bucklew would like to know, will the Mississippi River be included in the EIS?
Yes, the Mississippi River will be included in the analysis, and that would have to do with water levels and flow and sedimentation and those type of issues. The question I'm seeing here is more geared towards the state of Mississippi itself. And yeah, so there's a couple of those that are rolling in from that concern Mississippi. So again, how far east and northeast we take our study will depend on where we're seeing the impacts and the water quality changes once the modeling outputs are provided to us from CPRA.
Thank you. Marissa Turner would like to know, what, if any, are the impacts of the proposed diversion on Mississippi Sound and the long-term fisheries productivity of Breton Sound and Mississippi Sound?
Yep, thanks, Marissa. And I know that there is a question of impacts with freshwater entries from the state of Louisiana, and that's being examined. And the same would happen here with the Mid-Breton review to see if there would be any impacts to the Mississippi coast or Mississippi fisheries as a result of this new freshwater input.
Thanks. Ben Gordon wants to know, how will the project affect, I believe he means the dead zone in the mouth of the Mississippi River?
Yeah, the Mississippi River, or the dead zone that takes place off the coast of Louisiana periodically, it is something that we would investigate as part of the water quality parameters that we're investigating with the EIS.
Great, thanks. Ted Bear would like to know, will Mardi Gras Pass be closed?
I can't answer that. I don't know. I know that Mardi Gras Pass is currently part of the modeling landscape. It would also be part of the existing conditions for the project review.
Our next question comes from Carrie Trapani, who wants to know, what are the salinity levels limits of the affected Breton and Mississippi Sound before stopping outflow?
Yeah, I don't, I'm not aware of any parameters at this time.
So Paul would like to know, won't this project severely reduce the harvest and viability of shrimp, oysters, and spotted sea trout in Breton Sound? Won't it cause shortages and greatly increase the cost to the consumer?
It's possible. So part of our review will go into the impacts to different fishery resources, as well as the review will also get into socioeconomics and what the impacts may be to recreational and commercial fishing to the region. And again, you know, these questions that are being asked right now are perfect examples of some of the things that we're hoping that you provide to us as scoping meeting or scoping comments so that we can factor that into our review.
And Mark Winter is also asking about harvesting of oysters and fish.
Okay. Yeah, and it's important to point out that part of the Corps' independent review is reaching out to our third-party contractor and the subject matter experts that they have on their team to properly evaluate the salinities for the specific resources and what those impacts may be.
So Chris Macaluso would like to know, prior to levee construction on the river, would Oak River have been connected to the Mississippi River?
It's a prior tributary, but you know, it'd be hard to predict if it would be connected to this day, or even if the Mississippi River would still be using the current delta lobe that it's using.
Ted Bear would like to know, will navigable waterways be maintained?
Navigable waterways with reference to the Mississippi River, we're considering that in our analysis. We will also be looking at the outfall and any changes to any surrounding water bodies in that area too, as a result of either channelization or land building and accretion from the project if constructed.
From Renate Hurich, we have a question. What is your estimate regarding new land created and the associated reduction of hurricane exposure for the city of New Orleans?
Thank you. We're going to ask the state to respond to that question, please.
Yeah, hey, great, thanks, great question. In terms of land building, looking at some previous efforts prior to this permitting effort, we see the opportunity to potentially make tens of thousands of acres with the sediment diversion. And then obviously with new land and green space between our levees and our barrier islands, we would expect to be pushing back storm surge in some manner or fashion. Those types of analysis are forthcoming in this permitting process. That will be coordinated with the Corps, provided to the Corps upon their request. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Brad. Ted Bear would like to know, why was a dolphin waiver required?
Hi, Ted. I can't specifically answer that because I wasn't involved with that process. However, it's worth noting that there is a Marine Mammal Protection Act waiver for this project specifically, but that does not exclude it from the NEPA analysis. So there will be a section in the EIS Chapter 4, 3, and 4 addressing marine mammals, dolphins, and the potential impacts to those species.
Thanks for that clarification. Mark Winter asks, you are building on the cutback. Are you hoping to take sediment off the point bar across the river as a source of sediment, or will it be solely the sediment load carried by the Mississippi River?
Thank you. We're going to ask the state to respond, please.
Hey, Mark, great question. This project site location is actually on Wills Point, which is a point bar side of the river. So we will be using the sediment that's suspended, that's concentrated there onto the point bar and build up onto that point bar for delivering the sediment out to the basin. Great question. Thanks.
Thank you. Paloma Savastano asks, what is planned for the area below the White Ditch that has no back levee protection and floods with every tropical event or high tides, preventing traffic on Highway 39?
Thank you. We're going to ask the state, please, to respond.
Great question. Thanks. And with this permit process, we'll be going through and looking at storm surge analysis with the project and looking at that specific area that you're referencing to. So that would be an area that we would definitely look at in terms of the project. Thank you.
And Carrie again asks about the marine mammal provision, which I think you already answered that question, and asks that you remove the waiver. That looks like I don't have any other new questions. While we're waiting for more questions, I just want to make a reminder that all questions received will be reviewed by members of the panel. We are hopeful that the responses given will encourage you to develop your official scoping comments and submit them in the manners we have indicated previously by email, mail, or telephone. We will put that information up again. If we do not hear from you today, you may choose to join the next live event, which is tomorrow evening at 6 to 7:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And I do have another question coming in from Jennifer Wooten. Will this project's existing condition include the Mid-Breton diversion being operational?
Hi, Jennifer. No, it would not. It would still, the project would still be in development or construction, so therefore it would be a reasonably foreseeable project that would be in the cumulative impact write-up.
And Karen, this is Stacy. We'll let you catch your breath for just a moment. I'll remind the panel as well as Karen, the moderator, we do have 35 minutes left in today's event. So for those of you who are attending, there are plenty of moments to find the Q&A feature and submit your questions today. And just a reminder, if we don't hear from you today, I see that several of you have joined by phone only today. So again, attending tomorrow's live event via the internet is helpful, or on the left side of the Corps' project page, you're able to email your questions for response before submitting your formal comments.
Hey, Stacy.
Yes.
This is Jeff Lewis on the panel. I'd like to go ahead and address one of the questions we may have just jumped over a little bit from Kerry Trapani at 252. Why add the marine mammal provision waiver? Please remove the waiver. We just felt it was important to note that that is an act of Congress, and the Corps cannot just remove the waiver. So we just go ahead and set that out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much from the state. And Karen, I'll let you return. Are you seeing new questions come in?
I am. Mark Winter asks, what is the anticipated lifespan of this diversion?
Thank you. We're going to let the state respond to that, please.
Hey, great question. Like any other major infrastructure project, this thing would be designed for a very long time. And in particular, a design life of approximately 50 years and a service life of approximately 100 years. Just like you would see a major infrastructure project like a bridge. Thanks.
And we have another question from Ted Baer. Relative to the navigable waterways, will bayous be maintained, i.e. Back Levee, Oak River, Grand Bayou, etc.?
Thanks, Ted. I think the intention would be to allow the outfall area to whatever natural processes would take place in that area to just work without any maintenance. I do know that there is the potential for maintenance on CPRA side, but I don't think it's specific to a waterway. If you do, I see in your question here, you do have specific waterways that you'd like addressed. So it would be good to get that in a comment for us so that we can further investigate that.
Thank you. Alex Bucklew asks, I apologize for the redundancy. Could you briefly comment again in the EIS Mississippi's participation? So he's asking about the state's participation, I believe.
So participation-wise, I mean, we do have these meetings. We'll also have additional meetings for the DEIS and FEIS, or final EIS. But I think your question is more geared towards the potential for impacts. And right now, I'm not sure that we are under the impression that there would be impacts as a result of this project, but we're going to allow the science and the material that we get to guide us and determine whether or not we would expand our review footprint into the Mississippi Basin.
Ben Gordon asks, will the rise of sea levels because of climate change, with the rise of sea levels because of climate change, do you think we have a good chance of seeing success in this struggle?
Thanks, Ben. Sea level rise is a factor in the modeling effort, so it is something that we're anticipating and preparing for. So with the impacts or the benefits of the project, it would be factoring in sea level rise.
And I just want to remind everyone, you can find that Q&A feature by hovering your arrow in the middle of your screen. I had a little bit of a delay with it opening up, so be patient with it and get that Q&A opened and send in your questions. Stacy, how much time do we have left?
Hi, Karen. We have exactly 30 minutes left, so we'll remain on the line. We'll have the Q&A feature remain open. Right now, we're going to share again the way on the screen that outside of today's event and outside of asking questions, if you're looking to submit your official scoping comments, the Corps is taking those by mail. There's a lengthy mailing address on the screen. For those of you who have joined on the internet, and you can take a moment to jot that down or screen capture it. For those of you who would like to send your official scoping comments by email, again, that email address is CEMVN-Mid-Breton, MIDBRETON at USACE.Army.mil, or if you wish to contact the Corps by phone, you are able to leave a recorded voice message with your comments, and the phone number to do that would be 1-855-MID-BRET or 1-855-643-2738. Those are the 3 different ways that the Corps is accepting those official scoping comments. And again, that is outside of today's question and answer session with the panel.
Thanks, Stacy. Chris Macaluso has sent us a question. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, Karen, just real quick. I just wanted to offer the state of Louisiana, CPRA, the chance to respond with sea level rise and the question of success.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey, Brad Barth here with CPRA. Thanks for the question there, Jeff. Yes, we do think we can see success with sea level rise. We are aware of sea level rise. We look at multiple scenarios of sea level rise, and that's really at the core of the Coastal Master Plan and looking at that every 6 years in terms of putting the best projects on the ground. And with our Coastal Master Plan, we know that we have many, many tools in our toolbox in terms of restoration and protection to give us the biggest bang for our buck in terms of economic damage reductions there in terms of the types of projects we tackle. We do know, and relative to the 1930s, that's a big ask in terms of what's been lost since the 1930s. But we think we can make a significant change given the tools that we have and the different type of projects that we can tackle. So great question. Thanks.
Thank you for that answer. Chris Macaluso asks, to what extent is the state looking at other areas that get annual freshwater and sediment input to determine potential effects on fish and wildlife from the diversion?
Thank you. We'll ask the state, please, to respond.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Chris, for the question. All of them is the simple answer. So anything that might have sort of sporadic inputs there that you would see, so we can judge what we might have to something like the Atchafalaya Delta area, Cote Blanche Vermilion, those kinds of things. That's something that sees the more seasonal input. So we put a lot of stock into what we can see outside the window from observational data. So we're taking advantage of a lot of that. That guides a lot of what we do to understand how these systems work. So thanks for the question, Chris.
And thank you for the response. Renate Kurich asks, considering anticipated sea level rise, which would bring more saline water closer into our wetlands, what is the capacity of this project to counterbalance this impact?
Thank you. We're going to ask the state, please, to respond.
Hey, that's a great question. We know that the current environment we're in a sea level rise kind of event sequence and the geological time speaking. So we're seeing where sea level rise is slowly increasing and backing up the Mississippi River. So we think this project has some great benefits in counterbalancing that. And as we go through this permitting process, we'll be able to capture some more of those positive benefits in relationship to counterbalancing saltwater intrusion and sea level rise, whether it's from the basin or within the river itself. Great question. Thanks.
Thank you. Carrie Trapani asks, where can we, the concerned residents of Mississippi, find the modeling data with regards to water flow and marsh restoration?
Thanks, Carrie. And before I answer, I just want to say that I am pleased that through these meetings, we are able to reach people along the Mississippi coast. So thanks for your question. And so all the modeling data that, I guess the process that we go through to start the models as well as the modeling outputs will be summarized in a modeling appendix. So you'll be able to see both the inputs and the outputs of the material that went into the model as well as the output. So the DEIS would be your opportunity to review all the work that we put into the EIS. And that's currently scheduled to be provided to the public in the fall of 2022.
So that looks like we're on a little pause on questions, but we want to remind you that the questions will be reviewed by members of the panel, and we hope that your response, the responses given, will encourage you to develop your official scoping comments. Those are really important to the future of this project. So make sure that you get your scoping comments together and get them in by mail, email, or telephone, and we'll share that information on how to put those scoping comments in again later in our presentation. If it's not up already now, I believe it is, isn't it? Yes. So just a reminder, hover over the middle of your screen and you'll find that Q&A feature. And we'd like to see more of your questions. If we don't hear from you today, we will be having another event, live event, tomorrow evening from 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And maybe I'll pass it back to Stacy. She can remind us of our time left and other details.
Hi, Karen. We still have 23 minutes left in today's event, so we will just take a moment to pause. And those of you who aren't speaking can remain on mute. And we'll give everyone just a few moments. I'll ask that maybe we get up tomorrow's schedule for the planned event. Tomorrow, would be you're attending today's second of 3 live events that the Corps is offering to gather questions and respond to those questions in an effort for you, the public, to develop your official scoping comments. So the third session, again, will be tomorrow, which is Thursday, July 16th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. in the evening. You may be curious about yesterday's event or would like to see a recording of today's event, and the Corps will be making that available on the project webpage just as soon as possible. We typically have gotten those posted, or the Corps has gotten those posted within 24 hours. So still have a
We want to thank everyone for taking the time to ask questions. It's really important to the Corps and CPRA that you get your questions out there and you get your comments out there. You're part of the process, and you're a very important part of the process. So again, hover your arrow in the middle of your screen. If you're on a mobile device, it might be the top of the screen, bottom of the screen. If you need help finding that Q&A feature, you can message us and let us know, and we can help you out. Back to you, Stacy.
Very good. I think we have one new question coming in, Karen, from Ted Bear. So I'll let you take a moment to find that as it's
I can see it now, yes. Ted Bear sent a question. Since Mardi Gras Pass opened and has gotten larger, males are filling in, marshes being lost, and saltwater species disappeared. Why is this not a model of what the diversion will do?
Thanks, Ted. I think with the Mardi Gras Pass discussion, you know, aside from this project, the Mardi Gras Pass closure is one that we reviewed a few years back for Plaquemines Parish, and that permit wasn't pursued through the process, but the comments that we did get concerning Mardi Gras Pass, some were for it and some were against, and it is a pretty good model for Mid-Breton. Sorry, I'm working on another diversion as well, but I think when you talk about Mississippi River introductions into a basin, I think you're going to get people for and against, and it's one of the things that we're trying to weigh with our public interest review and factoring into our overall permit decision. You know, when looking at your question, you did point out some of the different impacts that you could see with a river introduction, both being some scour and some new land appearing. So those would be the types of processes that you could expect to see with this larger proposed diversion.
Thanks for that answer. Looks like we're at another pause. I get a little bit of a delay, so there might be questions coming through, and we'll wait and see if they do.
And Karen, while you take a pause for those questions to come in, I will let the Corps and CPRA know that we did have 86 attendees at the start of the Q&A session. We're starting to see just a few of them leave. There are 73 attendees at this time. We still have plenty of time to continue to take questions. About 17 minutes before the end of our scheduled event, so we will hang on for the full amount of time, and we may remain silent and wait for those questions to come in.
And we do have some coming in. Carrie Trapani asks, is there a MS Army Corps engineer representative?
That part of Mississippi falls under the Mobile district, so you would need to contact them for any specific questions you might have.
And Simone Domingue asks, what type of environmental conditions would allow for maximum operation of the diversion?
Thank you for the question. We'll ask the state, please, to respond.
Hey, great question. The diversion is a passive operation system, so it relies on the water in the river and the head differential to the basin. So the max operation of 75,000 CFS would not occur until the river reached approximately 1 million CFS in terms of that operation. Thanks for the question.
So I'm going to give it a pause and see if a few more questions come through. Like I said, there's a little bit of a delay, so it's good to be patient. Your questions are very important, so don't be shy. Send them in to us.
I'm looking through the Q&A, and I'm seeing maybe some questions that we either missed or could elaborate on further. Ted asked another question here further up at 239 about Mardi Gras Pass and would it be closed. We would, I mean, if that's a project that was submitted to the Corps, we'd certainly analyze it. There is no intention for the Corps to close Mardi Gras Pass at this time, so that request would have to come from a third party or Plaquemines Parish. I saw a question concerning project life, and currently we're reviewing the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion to be in operation for 50 years.
Thanks for reviewing those questions. Sometimes they come in quickly, and if we've missed your question, feel free to resubmit it. We do not want to miss any of them, and it's good that we have a lot of eyes looking at them. So it looks like we do have another question coming in from Carrie Trapani. With regards to the Mardi Gras Pass project, would that project be considered a success or a failure? With hindsight being 2020, should it have been done?
So yeah, thanks for the question, and I don't think we should frame Mardi Gras Pass as, you know, give it a pass-fail. I mean, it's just a function of river operation, and there was a structure currently at that location, the Bohemia Spillway. There was a washout around that structure, which led to that reintroduction of the Mississippi River into that portion of the basin. So as far as whether it's successful or not, I know that Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation does a pretty good job at monitoring that area. I'm not aware of any published reports that to expand upon that, but I don't think that we should consider it a project like this, and more towards looking at it as just a natural function of the river, and, you know, river function.
So we have another question from Ted Bear. Why not dredge? It's been very successful in Mississippi.
And we'll ask the state, please, to respond.
Hey, that's a great question. For those that may or may not be familiar with our coastal master plan, in our restoration bucket of the pie there, a significant portion of our coastal master plan projects are dredging. Somebody asked earlier about sea level rise and getting back to where we may have used to been and so forth. And this is where CPRA is in the firm belief that we have to use all tools in the toolbox. So we dredge a lot. That's predominantly the majority of the projects we do are dredge projects on the restoration side. In addition to that, though, we do understand the need for restoring the root cause or the damage that we see from the basins not being able to be estuaries, so not being able to receive fresh water, nutrients, and sediment to combat our saltwater intrusion, our subsidence and such. So with that leads us to sediment diversion. So sediment diversions are additional projects beyond what the state is already doing for dredging. Thanks.
Thank you. So while we have a little bit of a pause, I'm going to do my usual. I apologize if I mispronounced any names. I'm doing my best. And we want to say your name so that you're acknowledged. Your questions are important. If somehow we've misunderstood a question or skipped over a piece of what you wanted to know, please feel free to ask it again. We don't mind repeating ourselves or hearing different versions of a question. We have another one coming in from Ben Gordon. Are you all familiar with the book, The Ravaging Tide by Mike Tidwell? Free Press, 2006. So I'll throw that to our panel. Have you known about that book?
Familiar with Rising Tide. I'm not familiar with this title though.
So it looks like we have another pause. I'm going to pass it to Stacy to check on time and go over some other details.
Thank you, Karen. We do have 10 minutes left in today's event, so we'll continue to ask the panel to remain patient so we can scout for those questions coming in. Just a reminder, for those of you who are still here, I see 71 of you still hanging in there with us through the end of our event. We are very grateful that you've joined us today. It's very important to be part of the official scoping process, and we'll share some information again on the screen about ways to submit your official scoping comments. So again, the goal of today's question and answer session was so that you could have your questions answered in an effort to develop and finalize your official scoping comments, which can be submitted by mail, by email to CEMVN-Mid-Breton@USACE.Army.mil, or if you prefer to leave a recorded voice comment, you can call the 1-855-643-2738 number. And Karen, I'll throw it back to you for the next question.
Thanks, Stacy. Jennifer Moten says, why the 5,000 CFS base flow?
Thank you for the question. We'll ask the state to please respond.
Hey, great question. So we're looking at future with this project, not just what happens tomorrow, but in the future, we know that we'll still be battling sea level rise and looking at a base flow for the ability to adaptively manage for future environmental change and conditions in the basin. Good question, thanks.
Thank you. So we'll give it a few more minutes. It looks like there may be some more questions coming in. I apologize for the delay. T. Dinopolis would like to know, would the base flow still bring sediments into the basin or just water at that low flow?
Thank you. We're going to ask the state, please, to respond.
Hey, great question. No, the base flow would still bring sediment. So during the year, you consistently have a level of wash load within the river itself. So you would see some benefits from there. But like Brad said, as we go through this process, the Corps will be requesting upon us information that we'll provide to them with that type of modeling information that they can analyze for their analysis. But great question. So yeah, we would see wash load in that material.
Great, thank you. And while we have a pause, we do want to remind anyone who's on the phone in listen-only mode, if you'd like to return again tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time. We will be doing another session and we'd be happy to hear your questions then, or you can go to the website and put your questions in that way. And we'll be happy to answer them. We We've gotten a few questions through the website that we've addressed at these sessions, so it's a great way to do it as well. We'll take a pause and try to see if a few more questions come through.
And this is Stacy. I'll remind the panel that we have about 6 more minutes if the panel can hang in there for today's event. We're seeing a total of 61 attendees, so a few of our attendees have dropped off. But for those of you who are still joining us, we'll remain patient while you submit your final questions.
And this is Karen. Looks like we've answered about 30 questions to date, so it's been a really good discussion. Some of you may have had comments that weren't questions. We want to remind you that those will be recorded and they will be made a part of the official meeting, and they will be reviewed by our panels. So note that if all you have is a comment, we're happy to take it.
And just a couple of reminders too. You see the slide up there. It says ways to submit official scoping comments. You can do that via the regular mail, and the address is there. You can also send an email to CEMVN-Mid-Breton, that's MIDBRETON, at USACE.Army.mil. And if you want to leave a verbal comment, oral comment, you can call toll free for a 4-minute message at 855-643-2738. That's 855-643-2738. These videos of these meetings will also be available on the project webpage and also available on the Corps of Engineers New Orleans District YouTube page as well.
And Stacy, via email, we do have a question from Lynette Besh that has to do with areas on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, Franklinton, Hackley, Bogalusa, and Angie, and Bernardo, when it comes to flooding in those areas as a result of the project. For that to be the case, we would have to expect water level changes potentially in Lake Pontchartrain as a result of the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion. And I don't believe that we see that being the case at this point. But certainly if the analysis expands to that region, then it would be something that we would look into.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you to the Corps for keeping an eye on that question inbox that is separate from today's event. So we appreciate the public feedback and the comments. We've responded, as Karen mentioned, to 30 questions. We do have 7 additional messages that are more comment related or clarifications to questions that we have addressed. The participation today, I still see 57 in attendance, and with 2 minutes left to go, I'll go ahead and start making some closing remarks. We will leave the Q&A feature open, however, until time expires. So if you have some last minute thoughts, we don't see anything new coming in. So Karen, I appreciate your help if you'd like to mute yourself. And panel, thank you very much for responding to these important questions today. We'll let you also mute yourselves if you haven't already, and you're welcome to discontinue the use of your webcam at this time. And thank you to those who attended today. We appreciate the attendance. We appreciate your questions and participation. This is certainly not the preferred way that the Corps and CPRA would like to meet with you, but under the circumstances and the consideration for the guidelines for public health, we appreciate you being adaptable. The questions and the responses today will become part of the project record, and they can be made available for public review. A reminder that all the questions we received will be reviewed by members of the panel, and we're hopeful that those responses that were given today encourage you to develop your official scoping comments and submit them in a manner as we indicate here on the screen, again by mail or sending email to CEMVN-Midbreton@usace.army.mil, or by calling. You can leave a recorded voicemail at 1-855-643-2738. If we did not hear from you today, maybe you joined in listen-only mode, or if you'd like to join another live event this week, the final session, session 3, will be tomorrow. That's Thursday, July 16th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And I have 30 minutes after the hour. I don't see any new questions coming in, so with the Corps and CPRA's blessing, we will conclude today's event. I will ask the panel to stand by, and I will let our attendees know we appreciate your attendance. Again, you may exit today's event by clicking the red icon with an X and selecting leave.